Thank you for everyone who could attend the live call. So we have on the call with me right now I am, for the new people, I am the chapter's director at Burton. I'm based in Vancouver. You can contact me anytime you want at chapters@stancanada.org. Over here we have Scott Fenwick, who is the executive director of Stan Canada. His email address is ed@stancanada.org, and he's based in Calgary or Edmonton, one of them. I always forget.
Edmonton.
And Priya is in Calgary. And she is our policy co-director, and you can reach her at policy@stancanada.org. So we're going to go ahead with things, and I will just share with you guys the agenda. What do you guys see right now?
We do see the slides. Yep.
You see the slides full screen?
Not quite full screen.
But full screen enough?
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't see my notes?
No, just
Okay, cool.
the top of the browser.
All right.
URL, etc.
All right, so we'll get moving here, and we have an agenda. How do I make this bigger? Okay, so we're going to start off with a welcome to the new year at Stan Canada for the 2015-2016 academic year. We're going to take you through an overview of the election campaign handbook. So as you should all be aware, for the election, the federal election happening in October, Stan has organized a national campaign around the election, and we'll walk you through the basic components of it that will be released in the handbook shortly. And then Priya is going to give us all an overview of the policy recommendations for each of the 4 focus regions, 2 of which are new additions. So this is a really good opportunity for people to learn a little bit more about this new region of focus, or these new regions of focus, and get some context to feel comfortable talking about the conflict there and what Stan's policy recommendations are. And then we'll follow with a Q&A. If you are not watching this call live, what I encourage you to do is keep an email open while you're watching and type questions, comments as you go, and send it to me, and I will respond as soon as possible. So thank you for those of you who tried to make it to this meeting and then couldn't deal with the time change. So I apologize, and thank you. All right. Scott, do you want to say anything first? To the new chapters, or new chapter executives, and the recurring people?
Yes, I muted my mic and I needed to unmute it. So anyway, to anyone that's new, hi there. I'm Scott, Executive Director. Similar to Adi, I'm a lifer in the organization. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for participating in your chapters and taking a leadership role. Back in the day, for about 3 years, I was an executive with the University of Alberta chapter, and I'm very well aware of how crazy it can be when you're trying to balance the smooth running of a campus chapter and not killing your GP at the same time. I've been there. Many Stan directors have been there. But anyway, as we're going into this election campaign, I don't know, as a student of political science, there's always been a romanticism with being able to connect people with their elected representatives. So we are participating in the democratic process as best we can about an issue that matters and an issue that not many people necessarily are talking about all that much. So in sum, I just want to say thanks again for being able to come here and to be able to work with us towards a world without genocide, as our slogan says. Iddy?
Thank you, Scott. So What I would like to say to the new people who haven't been on a chapter call before is that these calls happen roughly once a month, and they're designed to deliver information to chapters in the most direct way possible, but also to solicit feedback in real time and to generate some discussion. So we're a little bit limited by the technology here and the degree to which you can participate in this call, but there is a Q&A option box thing that you can type, and throughout I will check to see if you have any questions at the end of each segment here, and we can respond to them directly. And I look forward to many more of these calls throughout the year. And if you have feedback on the format or the type of information that we're including, we're always eager to hear about it, so please do share. Okay, so an introduction to the federal election campaign. So Canada's 42nd federal election was called just a few 13 days ago. And it is taking place on Monday, October 19th, 2015. Some of you might be aware that this election will be the longest election in modern Canadian history, and it's the main players here are the Conservatives, the New Democrats, the NDP, the Liberals, and to some degree the Green Party. So the politics of how this election is going to work and how the vote is going to split is very controversial and very much on the minds of people working in politics and involved in politics in Canada. So I encourage you to learn a little bit about the electoral process and how this works, and there's a little bit more information in the handbook. However, one thing that we do want to point out is that Canada's current involvement with the military campaign against the Islamic State, ISIS, ISIL, IS, bunch of different names there. They all mean the same thing, roughly. So Canada's military involvement has made foreign policy, and specifically foreign policy in one of our focus regions, a major issue in this election. And this presents a really unique opportunity for STAND to take to really lead a discussion here amongst youth around our involvement in that region and the relationship to human rights and genocide. And the other focus regions will also be a part of the discussion at STAND Canada, and we will be partnering with various organizations to try to deepen the discussion around these issues and call for specific policy action on the part of an elected government when they are elected in October. Okay, so for the election campaign, because we have new focus regions, this means that we have new strategies for each of the different focus regions related to how we're going to present them to the parties in general and in terms of specific parties. So we're working on a bunch of different resources to get you guys up to speed with feedback that we've received from members of parliament and candidates on how to talk about these issues and research from our own organization. The 4 main goals of this campaign is 1, you can see on the slide here, lead youth, political candidates, and their volunteers in a non-partisan, I want to stress that point, a non-partisan critical dialogue regarding STAND's relationship to genocide, and in particular Canada's role in STAND's focus regions, which are Iraq, Syria, South Sudan, Sudan, and Myanmar. I want to emphasize again the non-partisan aspect of this campaign. So some of the parts of this campaign may seem to you like we're endorsing a candidate, and we want to be very explicit that at no point during this election or at any other time will STAND be directly endorsing a political candidate. We're trying to maintain a non-partisan environment so that we can have open dialogue with each of the major parties and minor parties for that matter. Second, part of this campaign is to publish feedback on each party's positions and policies concerning genocide and STAND's focus regions in order to foster dialogue. Thirdly, to engage youth and political candidates in publicly supporting STAND's anti-genocide policies and positions leading up to voting day. And fourth, continually engage social media to show support for our issues. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through what we have prepared for you and what we are continuing to work on at National. So the first resource that you guys are going to get here following this call, probably tomorrow, is the election campaign handbook, and this handbook contains descriptions and explanations for each of the elements of the campaign, what I'm going to go over in the call today, and much more besides, including a detailed timeline of events with action items for both national and chapters. So you'll be able to see the breakdown of roles here and what we're all working on at the same time. And it's really important that you spend the time with your chapter to go through the handbook and make sure that everybody understands and has and knows that they can provide feedback also. And if they have really great ideas about ways for the campaign to grow and change, then we're also open to hear about it. So this is a collaborative enterprise. What we're sharing with you is a live Google Doc, so it will be changing. We will notify you when any major changes are made to the handbook. And the way that it's structured is in two major parts of the campaign, which we've divided into political action. So that's parts of the campaign that are geared towards stimulating action and political discussion, engagement with candidates, and then secondly, fostering dialogue generally around our focus regions and around our overall mission of a world without genocide. Throughout the campaign, you will receive a weekly campaign newsletter with the action items for that week, updates on what's happened so far, and links to events that are coming up or information about things that are going to be happening in the near future so that you can jump on board. For example, if one chapter has organized a particular event, another chapter can maybe jump on and collaborate with them in some way. So I encourage you very much, in fact, we kind of require you to be sending us updates throughout the duration of the campaign so that we can keep everyone up to date with what you guys are doing and keep things going and make them more collaborative. Thirdly, one resource that we're producing, which is a part of the campaign, and I'm going to summarize this a little bit. So instead of focusing specifically on focus regions exclusively, and instead of focusing on one particular or two particular focus regions, the overall umbrella for this campaign is the stance of anti-genocide, which you would think is fairly non-controversial. However, the nuanced points of this can generate some friction and discussion, and there's a lot of room for further engagement with the issues and all the politics of them. So that's something that we are committed to engaging as an ongoing discussion at national throughout STAN Canada. But what we put together for the general part of the campaign is a Youth Anti-Genocide Declaration, which will be going online very shortly. You will be able to sign the declaration and share the declaration through social media. We'll also provide you with a physical copy. And basically, it goes through STAN's general position on anti-genocide and how it relates to Canada and what we are calling for Canadians and people living in Canada and our political representatives to do with relation to genocide. So this is going to be a very important part of the campaign. It'll be a really important tool going into meeting with candidates and trying to engage candidates. In addition to this, we have specific policy recommendations on each of the 4 regions. So our policy team has been working tirelessly for many months now on putting together detailed, comprehensive, and specific policy recommendations for each of the 4 focus regions. So Priya is going to be going over those. Those are also very useful as a political advocacy tool, and they are also very useful in terms of generating education and educational opportunities and discussion. Fourthly, yes, we are also going to have our communications team working around the clock, going over all the mentions of anything related to genocide or any of our 4 focus regions from candidates, specifically in the House of Commons, but also outside. So we will be doing a kind of infographic social media campaign of what candidates are saying. And the point of this is not to, again, endorse any particular candidate or their viewpoint, but rather to say, hey, this is what people are saying. Respond to them, right? Write them a letter, share this graphic. Let's try to generate some discussion over what these people are trying to talk about. Lastly, what STAN will be providing as a tool and resource for chapters as well as for our advocacy team is an analysis of each of the party platforms, the major parties, with regards to genocide and with regards to our 4 focus regions. So I'm just going to jump and check really quickly if there are any questions so far. Scott, do you want to say something?
Okay, I think I'm muted. I was just shaking my head saying there was nothing. No questions.
Okay. All right. Okay. So in terms of political action, the parts of this campaign that will be geared specifically towards that is, first and foremost, meeting with candidates. So the national team, which is based in Ottawa but also is working across Canada, will be working to get meetings with candidates from all the major parties, and we have our specific target areas for ridings that have close elections and all sorts of different criteria that we're looking at there. But we really want to make sure that we get out in front of these people and have the opportunity to speak to them directly on what matters to us. There are many different angles that we can go at this. The fact that we are a youth-based and specifically also a student-based organization does hold interest to political candidates. I just recently had a long talk with a cabinet minister, actually, about why it's so important for youth to get involved. So I'm hoping to kind of leverage that and that we can all do so to try and speak to candidates directly. So our advocacy team will be producing a series of resources and packages and training and also comprehensive support throughout the entire process of getting a meeting with candidates. So how do you get a meeting? Once you get a meeting, how do you prepare for that meeting? Once you go to the meeting, what do you take to the meeting? What do you say at the meeting? And after you leave the meeting, how will you follow up with the meeting? So our advocacy team will be prepping you and going with you through all of this if you choose to form an advocacy committee within your chapter. We recognize that this is beyond the capabilities of some of the chapters, particularly if you're overstretched or if you want to take a different focus in what you guys want to dedicate your resources to for this campaign, particularly during recruitment season of September and October. So if you do decide and have interest from your chapter in putting together an advocacy committee related to these issues, please do contact me and I will put you in touch with the advocacy team. At the same time, if you don't have a lot of interest in this kind of thing within your chapter right now, I highly encourage you to make this an option in your recruitment so that you can attract different types of members to your organization and to your chapter. So if you are standing at a club's week's orientation week or whatever table and someone is interested in talking about a particular issue, make sure that they know that this is an option, because this isn't something that you as a chapter have to take on yourself. This is something that National will be heavily involved with and facilitating with you. So this is an opportunity to really develop your advocacy skills within your chapter and to offer that as a kind of professional development for potential members. At the same time, if you don't want to meet face-to-face with candidates, every chapter has the ability to do some sort of letter writing campaign. Letter writing might seem like a kind of archaic way to engage in the age of information technology and whatnot. However, it is still a fundamental pillar of the way that our political system is set up. And it's still a part of the infrastructure of how to engage with candidates and how to engage with members of parliament. So every chapter should be able and willing to write letters throughout the duration of the campaign. This is a really easy kind of activity to do. We will have a package put together for you as well with sample letters, tips, how to address the member of parliament or how to address a candidate or a cabinet minister and whatnot. So this will be an option for you guys to do, and it's a fairly low commitment, low risk piece to integrate into your overall campaign. When a candidate says something that is particularly important, or if there is an event that happens that is particularly important to the goals of the campaign, for example, if there's some sort of major development in South Sudan, or if if the Prime Minister talks specifically about something to do with Iraq, Syria that's related to our campaign, we will be sending out action alerts. So if you haven't received any of these in the past, I encourage you to make sure that you're on the Stand Canada mailing list, which you can access through our website. And basically what it will do, it'll say, this happened, go do this right now. Sign the youth declaration, write the political candidates or the organization, or there'll be a bunch of different options. So make sure that you're on those lists and that you get other people to be on those lists as well. In terms of political action, we have fourthly here the I Stand For campaign. Some of you will be familiar with this from the last campaign for the Conflict Minerals Act. This is a campaign that was put together by UBC several years ago already, and basically what it will take form, you'll have on the one hand, let's see if I can actually get you guys a picture here. I think it'll be too complicated and take too long. Hold on. So basically, there'll be a laminated poster that all the chapters will be receiving. That will have on the front, it'll say "I stand for" with the STAN logo, and you'll get a dry erase marker. And this is a really easy thing to integrate into your recruitment strategies as well, because what you can do is, if you, especially for those of you who have to comply with paperless orientation campaigns or tables or whatever, you can get random people or people who are interested or your own members to come and write "I stand for" whatever they stand for in relation to this campaign. Take a picture, put it on social media. We'll repost it and keep it going and generate a quite large library of "I stand for" images representing a huge breadth of youth in Canada and what is important to them. At the same time, we have postcards that will be coming to you as well. There are going to be 5 versions of the postcard. 4 of them each one will have one policy recommendation on the back, so the person can write on the front of the postcard "I stand for." They can choose the policy recommendation that they think is really important, write some extra comments, send it to a political candidate, and then we also have a blank one for people who want to write for whatever matters to them. So this is also a really easy thing to integrate for any size chapter or any type of resource with any type of resources that you guys have, because we will be providing you with the materials, and it'll be really easy to pull off. And then I already mentioned the social media mention campaign. So all the "I stand for" stuff is going to be put on social media. There's also, I just got a text from our human resources and operations director. Make sure that you all go to the Instagram for the "I stand for" photos. So Stan has an Instagram account for this. And so all of these social media campaigns will be led by our communications team, and they'll be going at it really consistently and getting you information and sharing it broadly. At the same time, all chapters should be using their social media to repost and retweet and whatever throughout the duration of the campaign. And if you are not able to generate content on your own on a regular basis, you should always be sharing national stuff, because we will be posting very consistently with quite a large volume or high volume throughout. So please make sure that you are following STAN on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter, and LinkedIn. Fostering dialogue. So in terms of how are we going to generate serious discussion about the main points of our campaign, especially recognizing that with the introduction of the new focus regions, there's kind of an education deficit, especially because I've been hearing from a lot of the chapters that the DRC is really, the Democratic Republic of Congo is really the area which a lot of chapters felt the most comfortable discussing and that they felt that they knew the most about. So now the DRC is not part of our focus regions anymore, and the addition of Iraq, Syria, and Myanmar, both very complex conflicts, with the serious developments in South Sudan and Sudan, also very complex conflicts. We want to make sure that we give you guys the opportunity to learn, not just the facts, but also those points of nuance and that the really difficult aspects of these campaigns. Because with STAN, we're not saying that we have all the answers, but we do want to make sure that it is a point to continue to foster dialogue, continue to engage with these issues, and we're going to be providing a few platforms for that during this campaign specifically and throughout the year. So the events that we are going to be having will be 2 Hangout on Air events. One will be a roundtable on Iraq, Syria, which will be taking place on August 30th, and that'll give you guys an opportunity to jump ahead and get some more information and get in touch with some of the complexity of these issues right even before the election campaign starts on your campus, before the academic year starts. And then on September 27th, we'll have a panel discussion on Canada and genocide that will also be online. So chapters, you can watch them. You can live stream them on your campus. There'll be multiple ways for you to engage with the event. We are also working on producing podcasts. So podcasts between 20 and 40 minutes long can be produced across the country in collaboration with campus radio stations, but also individually. So if you have an idea for an interesting podcast, if you have a speaker on your campus who might be interested, if you have a topic within your chapter that you would just like to discuss, and make sure that the discussion is shared widely for other people who are struggling with similar questions. So all of these are opportunities for everyone to be involved and to broaden the discussion and bring it to more people and to more campuses. So if you're interested in putting together a podcast, please contact me and I will put you in touch with the right people and help you get up and running. The communications team is also putting together a blog series going in depth and looking at various issues related to genocide, related to Canada, related to our policy recommendations. So please keep an eye on the STAN blog and share and comment. Finally, chapters are encouraged to also host your own events. So this can take a wide variety of forms as well, some of which, some suggestions are in the chapter handbook or the election campaign handbook, and I can work with you directly on each of those. So in terms of how chapters can participate, I'm just going to go over some main points again. So take this opportunity to tie this campaign into your recruitment strategy. What this campaign will do for chapters is give you opportunities to participate and develop your chapter in ways that either weren't feasible before or that you didn't have the resources for before. So jump on what National is doing and get involved in political advocacy. Recruit people with that as a centerpiece of your recruitment strategy. Get people involved in the national events that are happening. So if you don't have the resources to organize a panel discussion on your campus right now, especially with a short time frame, make sure that you make the most of what National is doing and put it together and jump on what we're doing. Get people involved in the discussion and do a live stream, for example. For those campuses that are having trouble with education and who feel like part of the reason why people might be hesitant to go into a meeting with a candidate is if they feel like they aren't able to talk knowledgeably about a particular conflict. So doing a podcast, attending the events are all ways to increase education on your campus. A lot of the time, that's what people want when they join the chapter initially, is ways to educate themselves. So that's a really good opportunity to jump onto as well. Form an advocacy team, meet with candidates. You can also, if you have interest within your chapter in writing, you can produce a blog series and work with our communications team on that. Host your own events. A really good first week recruitment kind of event is a movie night because it's kind of low commitment and a way for people to learn. Pair it with a letter writing campaign. Any Clubs Week activities, do an I Stand For photo shoot. Try to pair every educational event that you do or campaign that you do or project that you do with a political action element from the campaign. And there are many more ways. So I will be available to work with chapters closely on any ideas that you have. And so please get in touch with me. All right. Now I'll turn it over to Priya, who will take us through our policy recommendations and give you guys some background on those. Priya, are you ready?
I was muted. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Just talking away with a muted mic. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your co-policy director, Priya Ramesh. Today I'll be briefly going over the situation in each region of focus to give you guys some context to the policy recommendations we will be reviewing. These have been compiled by our policy team of researchers, as well as myself and my co-director, Katerina. So just to kind of go over the importance of the recommendations and the process. The recommendations we make are meant to consolidate our research and findings. They exist to sort of direct the focus of our government to the areas in which their international involvement can grow, be improved, or changed. These are recommendations to guide our government in regions they are already committed to work within for the next few years. And STAND, as an organization that looks to prevent genocide, will then make policy recommendations that encourage our government to be an international actor that upholds this agenda. We want our government to commit to the international promises they've already made in some of these regions, and also point out the areas in which our government has the ability to make a more relevant, positive contribution. So writing these they're quite a long process and something that will continue to evolve. We research our regions, we research the nature of the conflict, how it began, what's happening, what's going to happen. We look at the ways in which our government has already played a role in these regions, and then we break down the conflict in each region to different categories. From there, we begin to look at recommendations other partnership organizations have also made for our government to take into consideration while involving themselves with these conflicts. From here, we begin writing our recommendations and transparently allow directors from different STAN departments to review and improve them. These recommendations are still evolving, so being researched and backed up, and continue to be tweaked to be more understandable and effective. We try to write recommendations that can be followed and implemented and reflect the long-standing Canadian foreign policy values. So while the wording of these recommendations will change in the coming month, mostly to be more specific, the core issues they try to push our government to take on will remain the same throughout this campaign. So we can kind of get started on Iraq and Syria. So to begin with Iraq and Syria, this will be a central foreign policy topic each party will be discussing throughout this federal election campaign. So it's really important for us and all of you guys to be well educated on it and know the context of our policy recommendations. So just to give a bit of background here, what we're focusing on with our recommendations, and most of our research is going towards the rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. So the rise of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria in Iraq and Syria is a global security threat. 3 years after the start of the Arab Spring, a radical Islamist group that has been gaining power since 2004 rose and declared itself a caliphate. Recently, ISIS occupied part of northern Syria and Iraq and continues to expand. ISIS promotes a radical interpretation of Islam and aims to extend its power and influence as far as Jordan, Israel, the West Bank and Gaza, Lebanon, Cyprus, and Turkey. This process includes the overthrowing of governments, forced conversions of non-Muslim civilians, and the killing and terrorization of local populations to establish their presence. Right now, estimates suggest that ISIS is comprised of about 30,000 fighters, half of whom are foreign. So I'm going to just tell you a bit about the current presence of the Canadian government in the region. So since 2014, the Canadian government has had a military presence in Iraq and now in Syria as well. Operation Impact is the Canadian Armed Forces contribution to the Middle East Stabilization Force, which is a multinational coalition meant to stop the rise and spread of ISIS. So Canada's part in this initiative is primarily through airstrikes as well as delivering military supplies to the Iraqi government. So Canada, aside from Operation Impact, our government has also made commitments to resettle refugees from Iraq and Syria, 20,000 refugees from Iraq by the end of 2015, and 10,000 Syrian refugees over the next 2 years. Our resettlement commitment to this region is not only the largest from the Canadian government in the past 25 years, but it's also been an active and successful pledge thus far. Several thousands of refugees have actually been settled. But to live up to the pledge we've made recently, which is about 30,000 refugees, we're going to have to change our strategy a bit, but our policy recommendation kind of goes over that. So Canada has also been playing an active part in providing Iraq and Syria with humanitarian aid. Since 2014, Canada has committed a total of $107.4 million in humanitarian assistance for Iraqis and $503.5 million to the situation in Syria. This funding goes towards food, shelter, relief, and education. So if you look at the debates and the news that's going to be coming out regarding this current election campaign, it's really going to be kind of a push and pull between should we be increasing our aid or should we be putting in more like military strength. That's really what's going on when you look at Operation Impact and what the Canadian government is doing in regards to ISIS. So our breakdown of this conflict and the recommendations we're putting forth are split into certain areas. So as you'll see, the first recommendation is expanding or redirecting Canada's Operation Impact duties. So this is meant to target, 1, the rapid expansion of ISIS, 4, weak central military presence in Iraq and Syria, and also civilian protection and aid. So when we talk about the rapid expansion of ISIS, we have 2 issues. One, it's a territorial problem. They're overtaking the entire country. The other one is also the problem of impending genocide of non-Muslim minorities. So we need to find a way in which Operation Impact is not just about airstrikes, but has a bit more strategy involved that it can combat the spread of ISIS, the risk of genocide, and also kind of like snowball that into having more civilian protection and aid. So as you can see, our first recommendation is broken down into one, creating a larger humanitarian component, which is redirecting our military strategy, including civilian protection rather than just having airstrikes and dropping bombs. You're going to hear a lot more dialogue about this right now. B is through foreign ministry analysis and international cooperation, find alternatives and complements to airstrikes as a means of strategically stopping ISIS. So under B, you'll see B1, which is an example of this. Taking a look at the Iraq army, taking a look at the situation at Iraq on the ground, and trying to strategically combine all the opposition forces of ISIS and working with them rather than just the Iraqi military. This is kind of just like a suggestion that we're still working on. We need to put some more research into it because it's quite complicated in nature. But this is an idea on how we might redirect the focus of Operation Impact from rather than just being a source that goes in there and drops bombs on Iraq and Syria. So after this, you will see our second major policy recommendation is to work with the UN and other humanitarian organizations to continue resettling Syrian and Iraqi refugees. So in the breakdown of the conflict that I was talking about earlier, the second biggest issue is the refugee situation and internally displaced persons. So several thousands of people are being displaced because of the conflict. They're fleeing from their homes, and they're fleeing the country as well. So what we have here is we attempt to fulfill the pledge to resettle overall 30,000 refugees over the next 3 years, but we have to direct more of our resources towards actually being able to do this. This means fast-tracking certain processes, taking a look at people who are in certainly more dire conditions than others, in some cases having to put persecuted minorities out there before some other people. We need a bit more to actually meet this pledge. We're going to have to change our strategy up a bit, and we're going to have to move a bit quicker and efficiently. The third recommendation we have for Iraq and Syria is working with humanitarian actors and NGOs to increase humanitarian aid in both Iraq and Syria towards food security, water and sanitation, education, and healthcare. So this is kind of reflective of a lot of sentiments of our partnership organizations. They feel that there should be more going towards the aid situations there because violence continues to be on the rise. None of the situations is currently being, it's just getting worse, let's say that. So they think our current amount that we have put forth towards humanitarian aid can certainly be increased. And with that, also add a humanitarian component to what Operation Impact is doing there. So this is kind of an overview of Iraq and Syria. One thing I will say is we will have like a very comprehensive Iraq and Syria guide sheet available for chapters to give you enough background detail on all aspects of the conflict, a breakdown of our recommendation, and links to further material to help you get educated on the conflict, especially because Iraq and Syria is our new region of focus. Not a lot of people are experts on talking about it or even the situation, which even includes our government in some cases. So we're going to need a lot of material to actually be able to discuss this region and the conflict there. So this is just a really brief overview. So let's go on to South Sudan now. So again, a bit of background. South Sudan became independent from Sudan in 2011. It suffered conflict long before its independence as well as since. So long-standing issues in the country include resource disputes, a struggle for self-determination, religious tension, all of which has led to these peace agreements being short-lived, two really bad civil wars, and millions of people dead and displaced. So I think in 2005, there was a comprehensive peace agreement, which was signed, meant to establish 6 years of peace and reconstruction. In 2010, elections that were supposed to have led to a democratic transformation instead gave way to the people of southern Sudan voting for their independence in a referendum. So in 2011, South Sudan was born. The birth of this nation, though, has been unstable, and mounting security issues, ethnic tensions, an unstable government, and a weakening economy has all snowballed into the outbreak of the Civil War in 2013. So the ways in which our government has been playing a role since 2013, well, in 2011, following the independence, Canada has opened an embassy in the country's capital in Juba. And so after this, the Canadian Armed Forces personnel deployed with UNMISS in the country since 2011 to facilitate the consolidation of peace and security. In 2014, Canada pledged $24 million in humanitarian assistance and $51 million in development assistance to assist in providing emergency food, shelter, medical care, clean drinking water, sanitation, and protection needs. In addition, Canada's development assistance is focused on maternal, newborn, and child mortality. However, there has been criticism of the Canadian government's lack of action, particularly with regards to Ottawa's slowness in developing a new cooperation agreement with South Sudan. As a consequence, bilateral trade presently sits at very modest levels. In 2014, Canada exported $2 million in goods to South Sudan, largely in the form of vehicles and other mechanical and electrical equipment, and imported just over 3,000 in the form of electrical and mechanical equipment and base metal products. So let's go into our breakdown of the conflict that's going on right now. We split it into three sections. One is the South Sudanese civil war overall. Two is the decreasing presence of UN and humanitarian aid workers. And three is widespread famine in the region. So our policy recommendations try to push our government to engage with these three categories of the way we've broken down the conflict. So if you look at our first policy recommendation, which is the Canadian government must pressure President Kiir and the government of South Sudan to abide by all ceasefire agreements and to take necessary steps to hold accountable those who have violated international humanitarian law. This includes brokering a new ceasefire agreement alongside other governments. So under that, you'll see also we should work to pressure Sudan and Uganda to end their involvement in the conflict. So both these regions do have a military presence on the border of South Sudan, which has not really helped with the conflict, it's just worsened it. So this recommendation is directly towards the South Sudanese civil war. To give you more context on the civil war itself, it erupted in 2013, and it's a tribal ethnic civil war, but it's also economic and political and very complex. Since the beginning of the Civil War, thousands of civilians have been killed, and according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, an estimated 2 million people have been displaced, either internally or in neighboring countries. There's been several reports that government forces have committed atrocities against local civilians, which is where our recommendation comes in to make sure that all parties are abiding by international humanitarian law. And numerous attempts have been made by the international community, including neighboring states, to reunify the SPLM and bring stability back to the region, but all of them have ended in failure. So we recommend that our government puts more pressure on the president and the government of South Sudan to abide by existing ceasefire agreements and work with other international actors to actually make this actually a reality. So our second policy recommendation is to help the UN's presence remain in the region, but also effectively. Because of the conflict, there's a lot of areas in which humanitarian aid workers cannot reach certain people who are in really dire situations where they can't get food, there's no security, there's no water, health centers are really low. So we should be able, we recommend that we work with the UN, humanitarian actors, agencies on the ground, and with the government to be able to provide humanitarian aid to the people who really need it. So 3 and 4 are kind of in line with that, but 4 is more so to help with 4 is more so a reflection of Stan's goals towards genocide prevention. Aside from just trying to end the civil war and like help the people on the ground, we need to look at how it began, which is a conflict between the Dinka and Nuer people. So our 4th recommendation is that we should be working with local groups in South Sudan and humanitarian organizations to create reconciliation initiatives between these 2 groups, because that'll work to increase the prevention of genocide long term, rather than just close the civil war and get out of there. So these are our 4 recommendations for South Sudan. We can now move forward to Sudan. Second. So, background on Sudan again. Achieved independence in 1956. The country has been plagued by political instability, famine, and 2 brutal civil wars. With the eruption of the conflict in Darfur in 2003, in response to the humanitarian crisis and widespread human rights violations in the region, sanctions were enacted against Sudan by the United Nations in 2004. These sanctions included an arms embargo, arms freeze, and technical assistance prohibition, as well as an asset freeze and travel ban against individuals identified by the UN committee, which oversees sanctions against Sudan. So, a Darfur peace agreement was signed in 2006, but was subsequently rejected by several rebel groups, and conflict persists in many regions in Sudan. In 2008, 3 Sudanese leaders were indicted by the International Criminal Court for charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur, including the country's long-serving president, Omar al-Bashir. All are yet to be brought before the ICC, and President al-Bashir continues to travel freely, most recently to South Africa earlier this summer in June 2015, where authorities failed to arrest him despite the outstanding arrest warrant against him. So when we break down the issues in Sudan, our main issues are regional conflicts, poor democratic transition, and 3, a humanitarian crisis of internally displaced persons and refugees. 4 is an increasingly hostile environment for NGOs and UNIMED. So before matching up our policy recommendations to all 4 of those categories, just briefly tell you what our government is doing there. So currently, Canada is a partner in the UN peacekeeping missions in Sudan, UNIMID, and UNISFA. Canada provides over $12 million in humanitarian aid in 2013. Its development program focuses on children and youth, food security, and the promotion of human rights and gender equality. Canada operates an embassy in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, and although it has implemented sanctions against Sudan as mandated by the UN, bilateral trade continues. In 2014, Canada exported $71 million into Sudan, largely in the form of produce, and exported $230 million, almost exclusively in the form of precious metals and stones. No statistics are actually available, though, for Canada's direct investment in the country. All this aside, though, Canada's involvement in Sudan, in terms of our involvement in the region has been considerably less than what it used to be a couple of years back. Because of the conflict in South Sudan, most of our aid efforts has been directed towards the southern country, and we've sort of let go of our reactions to Sudan and our presence to Sudan, and how vocally, how we're reacting to the democratic situation in Sudan right now. So our policy recommendations try to deal with that issue. So the first policy recommendation you see for Sudan is where we suggest that our government should foster dialogue and coordination with international partners to arrest Omar al-Bashir, Ahmed Haroun, and Ali Kushayeb, and bring them to trial before the ICC. So this goes into a huge chunk of what we think the problem is, which is a poor democratic transition. So despite the launch of a national dialogue that would be open to all political parties in 2014, limited progress has actually been made in Sudan's transition to democracy. In April 2015, the president, in power since 1989, swept the Sudanese elections with 94% of the vote. The lead up to the elections were accompanied by a major crackdown on anti-Bashir voices and an increase in the power of the Sudanese secret police. The vote was boycotted by opposition parties and criticized internationally, but its result and the continued failure to bring al-Bashir before the ICC indicates that a maintenance of the status quo in Sudanese politics. So this is something that we think our government needs to really speak out against and put some pressure on other international actors to work with them to try and actually end Omar al-Bashir's reign or assist with that. Further, to deal with this category, we believe that the government should dispatch observers and researchers to Sudan to ensure that democratic process are being respected with regard to one of the following areas: electoral reform and accountability, loosening of government control over the media, individual freedom of expression, and rights to peaceful assembly and other civil liberties. This has been a long-standing recommendation when it comes to Sudan because we've always tried to have a part in the democratic transition of the nation. So this continues to be one that we believe should remain as a policy recommendation for the region. The third policy recommendation is we should continue to support demobilization, disarmament, and rehabilitation programs in Sudan by reestablishing a strong presence in the region through the following steps. So D, if you could just change, perfect. So there is a increasingly hostile environment for NGOs and UNABID in Sudan right now. So we need to be able to change that, and we can only do that by continuing to support DDR programs in Sudan. We need to reestablish a strong presence in the region, and as you'll see, there's a breakdown of the steps in which we can take to do it. To give you a bit more background on the hostile environment for NGOs and UNAMED, recently there's been like a huge push to get UN workers out there and humanitarian organizations outside of out of Sudan. So this is where that recommendation comes in. All right, so we can now move on to Myanmar. So November 2015 of this year in Myanmar will mark the second round of national elections since the end of its 49-year military rule. This will be a significant political turning point as the current party in power is faced by an increasingly popular opposition party, the National League of Democracy. The year leading up to this pivotal moment in Myanmar's future, though, has been very turbulent. Myanmar has faced the scrutiny of the international community, rising nationalism, and internal discord between minority populations and rebel groups. In the pursuit of a more peaceful, stable, and accepting nation, Myanmar must move cautiously prior to its election so that the shift in political power bound to arrive in November will not be the prelude to a really chaotic socio-political environment. So there's a lot of overlapping conflict threatening to grow more robust in this region, and it's imperative that Myanmar's government work to subdue this challenge. It's a very challenging national atmosphere before it regresses the efforts it's been making for the past 5 years to pursue a liberal democracy, a mixed economy, and reconciliation in the nation. So I'll let you know what our government's currently doing there, then I'll once again break down the conflict overall. So Myanmar emerged from decades of isolation in 2010. It also launched a plan that really wanted to advance democratic and economic reform really fast. So following this, in 2012, most of the long-standing economic sanctions Canada had put forth towards Myanmar were suspended. Since then, our government has expanded its development assistance to the country and intends to continue doing so with other international partners. In 2014, our government confirmed that Myanmar would be a country of focus for our international development efforts. From 2012 to 2013, the Canadian government contributed about $5 million to long-term development assistance in Myanmar and $3.5 million in humanitarian assistance. Since 2013, Canada has provided $6 million in humanitarian assistance. Bilateral trade has also increased to $10 million, with Canada importing agricultural and natural resource products from Myanmar. Canada currently works with over 50 Burmese civil society associations and has earmarked $15.9 million to help provide basic services to about 180,000 refugees in Thailand and over 500,000 internally displaced persons in Myanmar. So, to align with the needs identified by the government of Myanmar, Canada's focus going forward will be through implementing programs that stimulate the economy and advance democracy. Or that is what has been promised and said. Humanitarian assistance and funding is certainly present from our government. Our presence, though, has been limited when it comes to reacting to the current politically controversial situation in the country. We've not actually made any public statements regarding the plight of the Rohingya people, while several other governments have spoken out. Our commitment to advancing democracy has also been lackluster, with most of our efforts going towards poverty reduction. So I'm going to quickly break down the situation in Myanmar. One, we have the deteriorating conditions of the Rakhine state. Two, we have the Rohingya disenfranchisement and rising anti-Muslim sentiment. Three, we have the boat people crisis. And four, the cocaine conflict. So to make this a bit easier to understand, as this is also a newer region of focus for us, and not a lot of people have expertise on this region as well, you'll see that our first recommendation is to work with the government, humanitarian actors, the UN, and different organizations to help assist Myanmar with its development efforts in the country towards Rakhine State, to rebuild its infrastructure and bolster the economy. So the Rakhine State is the least developed area in the country. And the way you'll see the Myanmar story unfold is that you have the most poor state in the country, which is Rakhine, which is the very state that holds the majority of the Rohingya population, which will then unfold into the boat people crisis, leading to the situation we have right now. So back to Rakhine, least developed area in the country, 44% of its 3 million population are living below the poverty line. It's home to a majority of Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims, as well as other minority populations, including the Rakhine Buddhists. There's been a lot of conflict in this region and tension between these two groups, and the issue is that we have a lot of minority populations who are fighting for the very minimal amount of resources they get anyway. So in terms of the aid that our government is providing for Myanmar, we think it should primarily go towards Rakhine to fix the situation there. Our second recommendation is the government of Canada should put pressure on the government of Myanmar to allow humanitarian organizations to access the camps that exist in Rakhine right now, and to help people get resettled and to improve the conditions of these existing camps right now. So bit of background about that. Actually, I'm going to give you background about that after I review the third policy recommendation as well. It'll make more sense that way. So you'll see the third recommendation is to urge the government of Myanmar to grant the Rohingya Muslim citizenship rights, which includes all the things that basic citizenship rights comes with: healthcare, education, voting rights, the freedom to move around the country at will. So a lot of international governments are calling for the government of Myanmar to give this community citizenship rights, and a lot of our partnership organizations are also in line with this. So to give context to the situation, the Rohingya people are a Muslim minority who've lived in Myanmar's Rakhine state for several generations. Their plight is very much in line with what we Stand Canada focuses on, which is the prevention of a genocide. Now would be a very key time for our government to step in, make a statement, and pressure the government to give these people citizenship rights to avoid further breakdown of their relations and to decrease the possibility that this boat people crisis is going to keep increasing. What we have happening is a minority population who has no rights from the government, and they have a history of being discriminated against by the people of Myanmar, and now this has sort of become an international situation where they are fleeing the country on boats, and several of them have died on sea. Several of them have illegally gone into other countries, and now we have a massive situation at hand, which has created a need for a wider discussion on policies regarding refugees and migrants. So it's really important that our governments step in here, not only because other international voices are already doing so, but because this would be one of the biggest policy recommendations that work to prevent the potential genocide of a certain group in a region. So once again, for Myanmar, we'll have a really informative, comprehensive guide. We will for all 4 of these regions, but just want to let you guys know that maybe a bit more for Myanmar and Iraq and Syria, just because they're both new. Yeah, so that sort of wraps it up. Once again, that just was sort of like a preview of our policy recommendations. I sort of breezed through it because we're really pressed for time here. But you'll be able to see our policy recommendation papers later on, I think next week, in which you'll see context for why this region is a focus of ours, what our government is doing there, justification for each policy recommendation, and yeah. The last bit of recommendations you see here are just general anti-genocide recommendations. These have been developing for a long time within STAND, and essentially that this is just to kind of create a bigger anti-genocide dialogue within our government, and we recommend that our government create a subcommittee for the prevention of genocide and crimes against humanity, which should be attached to the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. And as you can see, there's a breakdown of how this should be done. Ready?
Okay, thank you so much, Priya, for that. So I hope that was a pretty useful overview of the main elements of the campaign going forward, and you'll be getting so much more information from us. So once the campaign handbook is released, you guys will be able to see the huge quantity of materials that are being produced right now by all the teams at National, and we're trying to make sure that we hit a bunch of different learning styles. So for those of you who like to listen, this was for you. For those of you who like to read, you'll be getting things shortly. For those of you who like to talk, we're working on that also. So if you feel nervous about the campaign going forward, don't, because we will hold your hand as much as you need, and we are really prepared and getting going on helping you guys go forward with as much confidence and knowledge and excitement as we can. Again, feedback is really important, so if anyone has questions, please do type them now or send me an email. Scott, do you want to say something before we end?
I don't have that much to say. You basically said everything that I wanted to say. No questions yet.
Okay.
Here on my end.
All right. Okay, so what I would like to say while we wait a couple minutes for people to type if they're typing is that the next chapter call is going to be on September 13th. So giving us a little bit of time after the Iraq-Syria roundtable and before the genocide panel discussion. So you'll be getting lots of emails from me. Please make sure that you send them to all the people in your chapter, and make sure that you discuss with your chapter before the year starts, so we can plan in advance. So please mark your calendars again, September 13th. If you need to contact me, chapters@standcanada.org. Okay.
Miriam says
again, if there are questions. U of T says, great call. Thank you very much.
Oh, I should mention, for any volunteers that work directly with the STAND director, if you have any questions, just send them to the director that you work with.
That too. Great. So I am also looking forward to the 2015 and 2016 academic year with all of you. So I'm excited to get to know those of you that I haven't met yet, as we have 2 more orientations coming up this week. Please watch your emails, respond promptly, and make sure you go over the materials. So have a great weekend, everybody, what's left of it, and we will be in touch.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care,
All
everyone.
right. Bye.